So we're on the look for the best video editing laptop, and in the last video we checked out this Zenbook 14X, but in this one we're going to be upping things a little bit. Level 2, this is the Zenbook Pro 14. This has the Intel 3900H and an RTX 4070 mobile GPU, so a lot more power than the previous one, plus the cooling is a little bit better, so let's see how good this one is. But we're also going to be checking out the hardware and export test, so even if you are not a video editor and you're a computer enthusiast, you can see how the software utilizes some of the hardware and which one is the bottleneck. Is the CPU, the GPU, the RAM? Does it use the iGPU or the dGPU as the media engines? All sorts of little things you can see in this video.
Looking for a cheap way to license your Windows? Check out WhoKeys through the links in the video description. Make sure to use the code TN20 to get a 30% off. Paste the license to the activation settings and you're all done. This license is for Windows 10, but you can upgrade it to Windows 11 for free. They also offer Microsoft Office 19 license. Use the same code TN20 to get a 30% off. Check out whokeys.com in the video description below.
Now, if you want to know a little bit more how we're testing these and why, then in the first part of this video series, I'm going a little bit more deeper into there where I'm talking about all that. But as you can see, we're testing it on performance mode, not at full speed, because that's a little bit insane, I think, for people to use performance mode. So the fans actually kick in and, you know, maybe go a little bit faster than the quiet mode, but we've got a full performance as much as we have thermals. In terms of the laptop specs, then we've got the Core i9-13900H. This is the 14-core CPU, 20 threads. We've got 32 gigs of RAM, and as you can see, it goes at the speed of 4800 megatransfers per second on megahertz. Here you can see the clock ratio, obviously, because it's a dual channel or double the rate, it goes to 48 altogether. Then we've got an RTX 4070 laptop GPU in here, which has 8 gigabytes of a GPU dedicated memory. We've got Intel Xe graphics in there as well, which also gives us the quick sync playback on the timeline with a lot of those codecs in here. And let's see how well does it swap between the iGPU and dedicated GPU and some of these tasks here. In the end of the video, we're going to also see how good is it in terms of the thermals and all that. So I'm going to just zero that to see how do we perform then. Okay, let's start then. First of all, we've got this 4K 60 frames per second 8-bit 420. Okay, timeline is extremely smooth. Like clicking through and scrubbing is like butter. As fast as I scrub, this is incredible, absolutely amazing. When I'm pressing play, I get 0 frames dropped during the playback, as you can see. Okay, maybe a bit here now, 1 frame. An odd frame dropped, but that's completely fine. Now, very important that you do update your Intel Xe graphics drivers, as well as both of the graphics drivers, like the NVIDIA and Intel drivers, because I did this test before and it wasn't playing back as good and was dropping a lot more frames than this, just because the Xe graphics wasn't updated to the latest driver. So update the driver, restart, and you'll get much better playback here. As you can see, super smooth. Let's move on now. So this is 10-bit H.265, 24 frames per second, 420. And this should be accelerated on the iGPU as well. As you can see here, these are the ones that decoded back. Decode 1, decode 2. I'll put the decode in there. So you can see as I'm scrubbing through the timeline here, you can see, look, the decoder 1 is playing this back. So 10-bit H.265, 420, 24 frames per second. Absolutely no problem playing this back. It's accelerated on the iGPU and you get very smooth timeline performance, like incredible. I can already feel how this laptop is a little bit more snappier than the previous one. The Intel Evo platform that has a bit less power and a bit lower boost clocks was a little bit, you know, less powerful. This is A7S3 10-bit 422, 30 frames per second H.264. And because this is 422, there's no hardware acceleration for this. This all goes on a CPU, and it's still incredibly smooth when scrubbing through a timeline with full resolution playback. Let's hit play, and the CPU is the one that plays it back. And then we've got some acceleration on the GPU on the codec. It's absolutely no problem. As you can see, 0 frames dropped. Now, 25 frames per second H.264 422 10-bit. So this is quite hard to play back. Clicking through the timeline is quite snappy, as fast as it can get, really. Scrubbing through is not as easy now as the previous codecs, but quite doable. When we're pressing play, wow, this is amazing. This is seriously good. This is usually quite a hard codec to play back like that. The previous laptop was a little bit struggling at this point. Obviously cheaper and much less powerful as well, but this is amazing to see that you actually get something as well with it, because the specs, the CPU looks exactly the same, 3900H, 3900H, but this one performs much better. Now this is all intra clip from Sony a7S III SI, and it's very, very smooth as well. This is playback on software as well, but this is much easier to play back. Now this is 422 60 frames per second H.264 10-bit. And let's have a look at this one, because this is now still on the CPU. As you can see, CPU is the one that plays it back. We do have GPU like the FX acceleration, but the decoder is the CPU. And let's take a look. It's slightly struggling. Oh, 13 frames and kind of stays there. Play back a little bit, but you can see that the multi-core boost clocks of the CPU is just able to actually handle this. The previous one with the Intel Evo platform wasn't quite able to do it. Press play. See, 0 frames dropped. It's able to do it, 60 frames per second, 4K editing, no problem. Bear in mind this is full, and on your laptop I don't think you would be actually editing this on a full resolution. Moving on to H.265, this is 420 50 frames per second. This should be now accelerated on the NVIDIA and Intel iGPU both, but as you can see we are using the iGPU decoder there and playing it back on the iGPU, and it's extremely smooth. So when you are using H.265 420, whether it's 60 or 50 frames per second, it's absolutely no problem playing these back. Completely smooth and 0 frames dropped at full resolution. That's incredible. Now this is a codec that usually breaks PCs and computers, anything. This is Canon R5 H.265 60 frames per second 422 10-bit footage. And with the color grade, first of all, let's try the scrubbing. It's very, very instant. Oh my word, and scrubbing through is just so easy because it's hardware accelerated on the Iris Xe integrated graphics on Intel CPU. And look at that, playing back, 0 frames dropped this footage. This is very hard. Like this Threadripper PC there is not playing that back as good as that one. Even if I'm having two 4090s in there, this laptop is better. Can you believe it? That's the truth. Completely doable. It's buttery smooth, absolutely no problem. This is DCI 4K. Let's press play. That's a bit hard to play back there. Interestingly, it does say only 5 frames dropped, and it's much better than the previous one. But you can see the CPU is the bottleneck here. All core boosting as high as we can. Kind of struggles really here on this resolution. Too many pixels, and that Canon RAW is a bit hard to play with. Scrubbing is not too bad, and I think you'd be able to do it if you lower the resolution to maybe 1/4. Oh, that's buttery smooth now. When pressing play, it's fine, but at full resolution, it's not able to do it. This is 4K Red RAW, and when we're scrubbing through, this is absolutely buttery smooth. Like a baby's bottom. 0 frames dropped, full resolution, 4K Red RAW. And just knock yourself out. It's absolutely smooth as anything. Now this is 120 frames per second, and I bet this is where it's going to start to struggle now and not being able to play back. even though it feels very responsive, but just because there's so many frames, you don't see them lose that many frames here. It doesn't feel as laggy, but it's not playing back all of those 120 frames. So the Intel iGPU is doing a great job here, but it's still a little bit laggy when trying to play back 120 frames per second. Now, I'm saying, can you edit it? Yes, no problem. It just can't play back all of those frames because there's too many 4K frames. It's not able to do that. In fact, I haven't seen a PC that plays back 120 frames per second footage, really. This is 422 10-bit H.264, so that goes all on the CPU, as you can see there, and the CPU is not able to keep up with this. Moving on to H.265, it's a bit better. Again, that goes on the iGPU hardware acceleration there. It's doable. It's not playing all of the frames back, but it feels smooth and doable, editable, no problem. 422 10-bit Intel iGPU is playing it back. It's doable. Okay, moving on to something a little bit more beefy. 5K Red RAW. Pressing play. Right. Oh. Nah, can't quite do it. As you can see, we're constantly keeping dropping frames, and the CPU is the bottleneck here because all of this gets played back on software, which means CPU playback. 6K Red RAW. Let's try without the color grade first. No, it's a slideshow, can't really do. This is quite a hard codec to play back, really. But let's try B-RAW now. 6K. No problem. Scrubbing is buttery smooth when pressing play. That's fine. This is Canon R5 8K sequence, and I'm not even going to try to play it back at half the resolution either, because this is one big nut of a codec to play back. Let's press play. Let's see. Even quarter of a resolution on the 8K, we're not able to do it. This wants a lot more power and juice to play this back. And no wonder the 120 frames per second on the previous one was struggling, because it only had 4 gigabytes of VRAM on the 3050, because right now we're pulling 4.5 gigs of VRAM used. Red 8K, let me take the color grade off and press play. Let's see what happens. Oh, actually quite instant. And we are dropping only a few frames, but still we are dropping frames. And 12K, it's not even worth trying. Now we're gonna do an export test here. For preset, we're using YouTube 4K. While it's sending this to media encoder, let's take a look, how did our system hardware handle what we just did here. So we used a maximum amount of 28 gigs of RAM. And as you can see, that is the bottleneck, because that's literally like the maximum we can use on this one. It doesn't let it use anymore. It leaves some other reserved for the rest of the system and so on. So RAM definitely one of the bottlenecks. Then the CPU went 102 degrees at 95 watts, which is quite crazy for a laptop. The RAM is running at 4800 mega transfers per second. And the GPU went to 72.5 degrees, and then the memory junction to 86. We pulled 62 watts on the GPU maximum, which is quite impressive actually. So then, zero this. Let's start the export and let's see how well does it do compared to the previous laptop. So the export test is completed, and let's take a look at the results here then. I did it twice just to make sure that, oh my word, sorry, I just saw the results. Just that we make sure that we're getting similar results so that one, test isn't kind of going mental. But we completed it in 30 minutes and 7 seconds and 30 minutes and 1 second. Do you remember how fast did this guy do it over there with the 3050? That guy did it 1 hour and 36 minutes and 1 hour and 38 minutes with 2 of these. So this guy is literally 3 times faster, which is insane result for from this level to that level. That's absolutely insane. So looking at the export timeline, which was 20 minutes long, we're taking 30 minutes to export that. So there's all sorts of different resolutions, all sorts of different things going on, and we're able to do it pretty much 1.5 times the actual time of the timeline, which is incredible power and speed. Now let's have a look at the hardware and see if perhaps there is some bottlenecks in there. First of all, looking at the CPU, you can see that we were thermal throttling, reaching 102 degrees and 87 watts pulled from the socket, right? Maximum boost clocks we reached was 5.4 gigahertz. Here we can see that we probably thermal throttle all of the P cores. Yeah, as you can see, all of the P cores were thermal throttling at some point, perhaps not all at the same time, but that's what happened there. If we're looking down at the GPU power, we pulled maximum of 103 watts, which is absolutely insane. Now this ASUS has a sticker there that it supports up to 105 watts thermals for this, but I can easily see that this was definitely more. There's no chance that the CPU was pulling 1.1 watts at the same time of all of the rest things. As you can see, the minimum was 5.6 watts, so most likely we're pulling about 110 more than that watts altogether, the CPU and GPU. So we actually exceeded the thermal what ASUS is saying on here, which is interesting. The GPU temperature was 86 degrees memory and 81.6 degrees actual GPU temperature, which is quite okay for a laptop. It's a little bit to the hotter side there, but it's still okay. This hotspot was 94.5 degrees, so it was doing the best to cool it down. In the room it's 26.5 degrees at the moment, so it's a little bit cooler than the previous one. But the Intel Evo platform, it has much more limited thermal boosts and the thermal limits, because there's only one fan in there, but there's 2 fans on this one. As you can see, it makes a massive difference. Also the GPU memory, dedicated memory, we have 8 gigabytes in the Pro version, and you can see that we literally used pretty much all of it. As you can see, memory allocated, the maximum was 7.7 gigabytes, and I could see that on the export there as well. We were using 7.1 gigabytes, which means that the 4 gigabytes on the RTX 3050 was massively bottlenecking this export test. And that's why it took so long, because you literally have to fill it twice and empty it, which is not as fast as this one. So probably if we had even more dedicated RAM on there, we probably would have used even more of that. But if you're looking at the RAM actual usage, then you can probably see that this was maxed out as well. Physical memory we used 25 gigabytes. So actually we didn't exceed that, and we could have used more. Maybe this was actually as well here. If we go preferences, I bet there was, no, it was 3 still there. So we could have used 29, but we used only 25. So that's that. In conclusion, what is this laptop for? I think you can easily edit 4K and 6K B-RAW footage. Any 4K really you throw at it, you're completely fine doing it. And when exporting, you're gonna see huge difference between the Zenbook Pro there with the i9, still the same, but just thermal limits and the thermals, they make a huge difference. As you can see, this is literally 3 times performance and 3 times better in exporting. So when you're buying or deciding between these 2 laptops, then perhaps the more power might make a ton more sense, and the 4070 makes a huge difference between RTX 3050 and what you can see in there. Now, I wouldn't go anything above 5K really still. I don't think this is really good for that. You can use it, even if you have some of the 5K, 6K clips, you have to drop the resolution and you can edit it. But this is a very, very solid 14-inch on-the-go editing laptop, and I'm pretty impressed. I highly recommend check out this laptop review and the the laptop in the description below as well if you want to check them out, or if you want to check them both out, or the upcoming laptops, I'll leave them in the description below as well. So stick around till part 3 and we're gonna, you know, up it quite a bit now. But if you're a creator perhaps not interested in laptops and PC building, and if you want to build yourself the PC with the best performance for your money, then check out the build guides in the description below. They're completely free. There are 4 videos there, 4 parts. Pick the one that's closest to your budget, and then I'll explain everything there in the videos. Upgrades, downgrades, everything you need to know is down there. Go check them out. See you soon. Bye.